Hey everybody, this is episode number one, take number two with Pickham Expert. He's kindly agreed to join us after I had a couple audio issues, but we literally did a full dress rehearsal for this episode. So excited to get out the final product, which will undoubtedly be the best episode ever since it's been rehearsed. Pickham Expert, welcome back, man, or welcome to the show, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. We're definitely going to run it back better this time for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, we have a lot of topics. We have the topics that were given on Twitter. I put out this is the first time I put out a thread for a guest coming on the show. But before we get to some of the questions, why don't you just give us a rundown of a how you got into betting and b your software development and the Pick'em Expert product.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I guess kind of the history of my betting started this year. Didn't start until earlier this year. I live in California, and so sports betting online is not legal here. And when Prize Picks and these daily fantasy sports books came out, I started to get into it a little bit. I thought it was fun to just place a little bit of money on some of the games that I was watching, add a little sweat to these games. And um, kind of my background, I'm actually a software engineer, uh, specifically a software engineer within the machine learning sector. And actually, when I started playing around with prize picks, originally, uh, I started coming up with some different lineups, and I found it really interesting when I tried to place a bet where they wouldn't let me place all players on the same team. I would get this like little banner, and it said, you're not allowed to place players on the same team. And thinking to myself, the obvious answer is okay, if you place everyone from the same team, there's probably some like interdependencies between these players. And that kind of got the wheels turning in my head a little bit of like, hey, if there's some correlation that they're blocking between players on the same team, like that's a pretty rudimentary block of correlation. Like there's definitely more opportunity here in finding how these players interact with one another within the same game. You could still
Definitely, I
have
love
players
it.
on both teams, or on both teams within the same game that still interact with one another. There's like so many different opportunities there, and so at that point, I'm like, okay, I think there's probably a way I can apply some of my machine learning background and modeling into this world. So we started getting the data sources of sportsbooks lines and started to do some analysis and we can kind of get into the whole like in depth of how that works. But ultimately, we started in hockey.
Yep.
We found there was, the opposing goalie on hockey versus shots on goal. And even just doing some research online of like what are the most correlated sports, people
Mm,
were talking about hockey a lot. And so,
interesting.
we started to get into a little bit more of the hockey correlation of just simple shots on goal versus goalie saves. And I think I remember hitting my first six pick ever was a correlation pick. And I hadn't done
Who
any
was the
modeling.
goalie?
I don't even,
Who? Yeah.
I need to pull up that slip. I need to like go
Yeah.
back and I'm sure I screenshotted it. But at that point, I was like, okay, I definitely need more data, and I
Yep.
also don't want to like bet this 1,000 times. So, I want to be able to do some data engineering and do some data analysis and see if there's something here. And lo and behold, we're able to get like a basic model working last NHL season, and we started doing really well to the point where we were limited. We got limited on hockey, and I
It's
had no
crazy.
concept of limiting. Like I was like, "What is this whole
What
deal?"
did you think? You're like, what the hell is going on?
The first thing I was so upset. I was so
Yeah.
upset that it just felt unfair.
Yep.
It felt unfair that just because I was winning meant that I couldn't win more. because you see this upside of like, okay, you have a
Sure.
strategy that's going to work. Like you could just increase your unit sizes and you could make infinite money, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I started doing this, I was like, oh my gosh, I could make infinite money. This is insane. And you know, of course, that comes to a halt. But that's where we kind of got the wheels turning a little bit. Started to research some more sports. Started to do some additional modeling on top of that. I had a partner who I worked with as well on this, who's also a machine learning engineer, and yeah, that's kind of where we had this basic product that would just send us the best picks that it would find that were most correlated. We would start placing them, and then we brought like a couple buddies onto it, and started sending them the same text messages,
Yep.
and you know at that point we're like we could turn this into a product.
Yep.
We're people are getting limited. We don't have that infinite upside when it comes to
Right.
making our own picks, but hey, let's see if we can build a product that others can use to take advantage of that upside, and then we take some of the profit there. So that was kind of the origin story of the Pickham Expert website.
Dude, I love it. So, first question. You said that you bet the hockey correlations before you had actually modeled out the correlations. So you were like, I think this is good. Let me bet it and see.
Yeah, I think like just intuitively I was like, I'm going to put some of these bets together and see if I can hit any, and just like see what they look like. And I started to see,
Yeah.
more of them were going over together, some of them were going under together, and you could start to see there was some correlation. But um, yeah, it was very like. Uh, a case study. Like it couldn't really like apply because I didn't have that much data yet. So I was very skeptical at the time, but I thought might as well dig into this a little bit more and see if there's something else we could uncover. And so that's kind of where, we got a little bit more into the weeds of modeling.
I think it's interesting because at that same time, me and my partner were doing power play line, shots on goal plus goalie saves, basically, like as much as we could. If they're line mates, if they're on the power play line, but we didn't have the same skills that you had. So we were like, I think this is good. I don't know how good it is. And then eventually we were just like, well, I don't know. We're going to stick with what we're good at, which is, golf and some of the correlated stuff there, or just the straight stuff there. And we kind of left it alone. So I think that it goes to show that modeling helps you, and you definitely know more about this than me, but it helps you build confidence in your ideas. Like you can have a good idea that can be expressed in a model, but until you start seeing some kind of objective ish analysis of that idea, it's very hard to like put the pedal to the metal. And that happened to us with the same thing. And we didn't have the model. So we didn't, go as hard on hockey as you did. And we didn't, make as much money.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that it plagues the sports betting industry too. Just like this confirmation bias of like you hit a bet one time, and
Yep.
like all of a sudden that's like a really good bet. But it's getting yourself to actually like what is going to give you the confidence to start placing much larger sums of money on that. Like, did you just get lucky on that stretch and like maybe you hit two six picks like within a week of one another, or is that a really good strategy? It's so hard to say uh, when you don't have the data to support it. So that's why I
Yeah.
always give hats off to a lot of these guys in kind of the EV world that are able to build up the confidence to start putting down higher unit sizes. It helps when you've built up a bankroll, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I think it's these books are always changing, and you never know kind of what could be around the corner, and so that's where modeling can kind of give you a little bit more confidence, and just truly trusting the data behind it, and truly trusting that your models are performing. I'll give you like an example of kind of how modeling
Yeah.
works for people that don't understand or like have never
Yeah.
done modeling.
Please.
You so what we'll do is we'll hold out what we call a training set, which is like we might take data from like I don't know, January to May or January to March. And we're going to like run our models to train, or we're going to run our training on that specific data to see if we can find any good correlated bets. And then what we'll do is for March to May, we can test those models on data that we pretended like we didn't see. So even though we
Yep.
have the data for it, we pretend that we've never seen that data before, and then we can see how well our models perform against that future data. And so that's what and there's like some different ways to measure confidence, like how confident are we that
Yep.
this actually applies to this future data. And it just like makes sports betting for me like a little less stressful. It definitely is stressful, but it definitely gives me a little more confidence because I know nothing about hockey. Like never in my
Yep.
life I've never been to a hockey game. I've
I love it.
never, I was never betting on it before. I don't watch it on TV. So for me, like I had to have some sort of like mathematical backing behind it in order to start really putting money on it.
I love that though, because it's so funny. Someone I knew in poker who was really sharp, poker player who got into sports betting. I knew that he went to college he was a music major in college. Literally hasn't watched a sporting event in his whole life, and he's like, "I'm winning money at sports betting." I'm like, "There is no way. There's no way." And I was like, "Can you name me like three NFL players?" And he was like, "Tom Brady," and then that was it. But but he was, because he was at the time he was steam chasing, uh, just looking at numbers and seeing when they move. But I do think that it's good to get some examples of people who aren't like diehard sports fans who still do really well in this, because I don't think it's a necessity at all. I mean, I'm sure you've learned a lot about sports. Like you might know more about hockey correlation than some hockey coaches and NHL players.
I definitely know more hockey players in general. It's funny, like you start making all these picks, like you start like recognizing names over and over again. You see them kind of like on social media feeds or news feeds, and like, hey, I actually know that person. I don't
Yeah.
really know much about them besides what we've bet on them in the past, but you
Yeah.
start to kind of like pick up some more sports facts through osmosis. And I've definitely watched my fair share of hockey games in the
Oh,
last
nice.
year, compared
Honestly,
to prior.
hockey's pretty fun to watch, I find. Like I think it's one of the better sports to watch.
Yeah, it depends how you're betting on it. I think when
True.
like a betting an all unders correlation slip is like it's a tough thing to watch because you're just hoping that nothing happens, and so it's like a very stressful way to watch a game.
No, that's and I so I mean I'm like the biggest unders like stan in the whole world. Like all I talk about is unders. Um and I need you to back me up on betting unders. And is there have you seen data on uh maybe the slight edge to an under or an over overall? Have you seen that data, or is it more correlation that you're looking at?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We look at that. I've actually put some TikTok videos about unders and why betting unders is, I think, much better. Your traditional retail better, they want to cheer for something to happen, they want to cheer for their players to do well, and so I think these books probably just juice the overs a little more heavily than the unders because they need to protect themselves,
Yep.
especially when a lot of the money is going to the overs. I would say kind of on a baseline, at least in the DFS books, it's about 51% under to 49% over. So
Mhm.
there's like a 1% edge. It's like just taking unders is not going to give you enough edge
Right.
to beat the
Right.
books. But it also depends on specific markets, and it also depends on whether that market has a high push likelihood. And
Interesting.
what I
Why
mean
is
by
that?
that,
Okay.
so like, let's say that you're betting um, hockey shots on goal that
Okay.
we were just talking about. If the line is set at 2.0, which a lot of books have them set at, the likelihood to push is still, it could be like 10 to 15%.
Right.
Usually the unders, they're going to try to keep closer to 50%. So you could
Hmm.
have like, you could still have like a 47% chance to hit the under, but there's like a 15% push. So that's your insurance.
Oh, wow.
And the over is going to be like, I don't even know, 37. I didn't do the math in my head,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you can imagine that the overs
Sounds
are
right.
much less likelihood of that to hit. And then it also depends on like how large that market is. Like if you're betting NBA points, rebounds, and assists, you have really high line values, so they're not low like hockey shots on goal.
Yep.
They can usually be pretty efficient. You're going to get like
Yep.
50.1 on the unders versus
Okay.
49.9 on the overs. So I,
Okay.
I think those will probably matter less. But I mean, from what I've seen, if you can get into some of these niche markets, if you can get to markets that have like higher push likelihoods, then and this is just kind of the data analysis I've done.
Yeah.
I typically err on the side of taking the unders.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, and I come at it from a, a different angle of like talking to people who work the other side of the counter and say that basically the overs have a little extra juice on them because of the action that the book takes on overs. So certainly, like now seeing that the data show that, and we're hearing that from people who actually work at sports books. Everybody listening and watching, bet more unders. Bet more unders, please. Please do it. Um, the push thing is interesting. I'm very intrigued by that. So it's essentially like you're looking for markets that have a point zero with low numbers, which means high push likelihood. So if it's like, you know, I'm trying to think of another. What's another one like a kind of bad pitcher
Yeah,
strikeout?
like a soccer goalie save or something.
Soccer goalie save. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, or
Which has correlation
for sure.
too with
Yeah.
shots. Yep.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
kind of another way to add some insurance to get that variance low. But when you think about these books, like, and from like a odds perspective and how they have to price them, especially with prize picks and having fixed payouts, where they have to give like an equal 50-50 over and under, uh, if the under is set at like minus 175 and the line is 3.5, then on prize picks they'll probably bump that to a 3, right? Because they
Right.
think that they gotta account for that half line push. But like that is a pretty huge uh, discrepancy, like jumping from a 3.5 to a 3. And so they're kind of forced into these situations where, they have to give a little bit more likelihood to, or they have to have these like pretty high push likelihoods. And they usually favor the unders more. So they favor the
Okay.
unders
Interesting.
and have some like, you know, barrier for the push. That's just what I've seen, but I could be.
Yeah. No, that is. I've always wondered about like how you read a situation where a sportsbook line is like, let's just say like plus 120 minus 160 at 3.5. You have prize picks at 3. Um, are you reading that as an over as opposed to like a 2.5 favored where you go under, or is it like, is that read? Yeah. What's your read on those situations?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person when it comes to like individual line assessments.
Fair enough.
Because I never really take my picks, uh, based on individual lines. Like they're always, I only take correlated slips. I never do individual line slips. Um, but I think that's a really tough problem to solve. I mean, when they want to keep really high line availability, they want to cover a lot of markets. They have to shift some of these, when market lines are set at 3.5, they have to kind of make a decision on whether they're going to keep it at that line or they're going to bump it down or they're going to remove it. And I think depending on the book, like Prize Picks wants to keep as many lines available as possible. They want to give you as many opportunities to bet. Um, but yeah, it's hard to say. Like I think our models can factor that in slightly. Like we'll kind of consider the odds, see if they made that bump or not, and we'll maybe favor that a little bit more. But I think on like when we're talking about like six leg picks that are correlated, that
Yeah.
individual edge, like you could get like an extra 1 to 2% on that individual line. Um, it's really not going to impact the entire edge of the bet of the whole six pick as much as you would think. So, like the individual line values and the individual odd values have much lower impact when you're betting correlation, at least, is kind of how I've seen it.
Spot on. I mean, yeah, I had someone ask me about that because, I, for a while, I was firing in like 300 better slips a week or like a Sunday. And someone was like, oh, is that is that under favored instead of that over? But I was like, I don't know. It's like super correlated and it's good, like it's more about an hourly. Um, but it's not like I don't have the actual data to express how different it is, but it does. Because it's exponential, right? When you correlate like that 1% edge on a slip that is correlated across six legs, that could be like a 70% edge slip, right? So if you're fighting for that extra 1 or 2% on an individual prop, you're not really, in terms of your overall edge, you're saying like that's not always going to matter too much.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. Like,
Okay.
um, I'll use kind of the technical term of like independent and dependent events. So like
Hmm.
when you're looking for an EV edge, you might look for two picks that are both 52%, right? That
Hmm.
both have like an individual or 54% or whatever you're looking for.
Yep.
You just care about those lines individually. Now, when you have a correlated slip, the first event to happen, so like let's take Patrick Mahomes, let's say Patrick Mahomes going over under in his passing yards is 50-50.
Okay.
When Patrick Mahomes goes over his passing yards, Travis Kelce going over in his receiving yards is what we call a dependent event. You're already assuming that Patrick Mahomes has gone over. So now, what is the likelihood, given that Patrick Mahomes has gone over, what is the likelihood that Travis Kelce also goes over? And if you look at all the games that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce have ever played together, and you see that every time he goes over in his line, that there's a 70% chance that Travis Kelce also goes over in his line.
Right.
Then what you can do is you have a 50% chance with Patrick Mahomes, but now you have a 70% chance with Travis Kelce, and you just take
Right.
the average. So now you have 60% is kind of um, your like average
I
uh,
see what you're saying.
line
So it's
probability.
like,
Instead of
yeah, it's your
54,
clear.
you've gone up to 60, and
Yeah.
that kind of increases as you add more legs to it. So it, like if you had like a 52% line and a 70%, like sure, maybe it goes from a 60 to 61%, but that's not where you're getting most of the meat. You're getting most of the meat from the fact that Travis Kelce went over 70% of the time when Patrick Mahomes went over. So
Yeah.
that's where most of the edge is coming from.
Right. Because yeah, yeah. So what you're saying is like it transforms the Travis Kelsey bet into like minus, 300 bet when Mahomes hits. So
Exactly.
you're looking at the probability of you hitting the actual full slip, right? You don't really care the probability of going 1 for 2.
Yeah,
Uh
exactly.
or
Exactly.
0 for 2. So you're like, okay, like the slip hitting 2 for 2 happens X%, and then the payout's Y, and then your ROI is, because that's I always say, like, I don't know if this is even, if this you would agree with this, but I always say going 0 for 6, or like, let's say it's an underdog power, right? 0 for 5, second best result after going 5 for 5 because it's just extreme correlation one way or another.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people ask me that, like, hey, can we take all of your slips reversed? Because if the correlation's there, like either Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are going to go over together or they're
Yeah.
going to go under together. And probably the same kind of interdependencies that those two lines have on one another, whether you take it over or whether you take it under. Sometimes there's slight differences, but usually you can take the reverse. So I do like seeing like 0 for 5
Yep.
or 0 for 6 because it just means that the correlation is there. It means that our models are doing the right thing.
Yeah, I bet it's sometimes difficult. Like if someone signs on and you go get a couple 0 for 6, and they're like, "Oh my god, this guy can't pick a game right. He can't pick a prop right to save his life."
Yeah,
And you're like, "No, that's good. It's good that we lost every single play."
yeah, definitely. I think just being in this industry, like you got to know how to like take the heat from people that lose. It's
Yeah,
part of the industry. Like you're going to lose, you're going to take a lot of losses, and especially when you're betting for 6 leg picks, 5 leg picks, like people don't realize that that only hits 1 out of 64 times. Like if you were taking that randomly, like random 6 leg picks, you're going to hit that 1 out of 64 times, and people want to hit that like every other pick. It's like,
every,
that's not going to happen. So there's just like kind of this disconnect and like needing to like help educate people like, hey, like this is actually a good thing that we went over 5. Like we're turning a 25x payout into a coin flip essentially. Like if you
right.
flip a coin and every time it lands tails you get paid 25x and every time it lands heads you lose 1 unit, then you're going to do that infinite number of
For
times.
the rest of
Obviously
your
we're
life.
not that good, but that's like the concept we're going for.
Sure. No, that yeah. I mean, it's I think I told this story once, but it was we were giving some bets to one of our betting partners, movers, whatever, and their parlays, their 5 leg parlays, and this guy's like absolute like heater, just through the roof. Like he's probably hit like I don't know. It was like a windy day in golf, so he probably hit like 4 out of 5, and then like another day probably hit like 3 out of 6. Then we one day he just like doesn't win. He goes like 0 for 4, 0 for 5. And he's like, damn, you know, what do you guys think? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not really thinking about it. He's like, strategy's still good. I'm like, yep, strategy's still good. And he goes, yeah, it makes sense. This is a 5 leg parlay uninsured. You probably only have to win 1 out of every 3 times, right? No. No, that's your expectation. No, I think I was like, I would own a soccer team if we were hitting at that rate.
We were hitting at one point we were hitting 1 out of 10 on six
Holy,
picks, which
that's
we went on
insane.
a streak for probably like 3 or 4 weeks where we were hitting 1 out of 10,
Oh,
which was just like I don't know if I may have just lost.
okay. So you're hitting 1 out of every 10 6 picks.
Yeah, we're hitting 1 out of every 10. I mean, we went on a streak for probably like a month or so where we were just like cranking out these 25x's, and uh, people started to get so used to it that anytime we would miss 15 in a row, it was like the sky was falling and it was all over, and we were never going to be able to win a bet again, and like the model broke, or like it's crazy. Like once people kind of start getting a taste of like a winning performance, there's kind of this like recency bias that they like to apply.
Yes.
So like anytime you hit like these downward swings, it's like, you know, it's like the world's ending.
And that's tough to deal with, I'm sure, like at your end, because you're like, you don't want to brush people off because they've lost money. But you also want to be like, listen, it's 15, right? The sample size that you need to be worried about is like hundreds, if not thousands. but like it's hard to tell somebody that when they've also lost their money and might not understand the math like you. I think
Totally.
we can't. Sorry, a couple of technical difficulties, of course, on my end, as what's been plaguing me and Pickham Expert. Uh, Back to the conversation about users' expectations who might not be fully aware of what you're aware of with the math and the
Yeah.
big sample sizes.
Yeah. I mean, I think one big thing that we try to do, and I think the nice part about having like a Discord and a community is like helping educate people and like helping them understand that specifically within DFS correlated betting or even just DFS betting in general, like you have to take 5 and 6 leg picks to find any path to profitability over the long run. I mean, I think in most situations, just
Yeah.
because that's where you can get, the most edge. People don't realize that for every $10 you put in, you get $7.50 back and that's the best payout that you're going to get if
Yep.
you're taking random bets on any of these platforms. And so it's really that's like a 25% minus 25% ROI that you have to beat out. And I think it's really important for people to understand that you're up against, pretty big, ROI that you have to beat out in order to be profitable. I don't know what the percentage are of blackjack, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot higher ROI than what DFS betting is. Um,
In
so
a
it's
vacuum with no edge.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Blackjack's not bad. It's you're losing 0.5% on basic strategy per
Yeah.
hand.
And I think people kind of like assume that with DFS, but in reality, it's like much different. Like there's a much larger edge you have to get over if you're just betting purely randomly, or you're betting on your gut, or you really don't have like a solid strategy. Like you're gonna lose 25% of your money on every bet, and so that's super important for people to understand. And it's really important to kind of educate people on why we have to take 5 and 6 leg picks. And then, kind of beyond that, understanding variance, like how variance works, like how many losses you'll go through before you get a win, and how profitable you can be, even if you still hit 1 out of 25 6 leg picks. Like that is a huge hit rate.
Right.
And some people will see like our win loss record and
Yeah, yeah.
how are you winning? Like it doesn't make any sense. Your win record is so much lower than your loss record. Um, and then you kind of have to explain, hey, these actually pay out 25x, and there's kind of this like math that we're working at. So before anyone comes onto our platform, like I usually try to make sure that there's some level of education. They understand
Mm-hmm.
what they're into, and they have like a very specific bankroll management. Like I always tell
Yeah.
people in my server, at least. I know a lot of people do the 1% method for 6 leg picks. We do 2%. I think we probably just have like a pretty decent hit rate, so we can afford that.
Yeah. Yeah.
2%. It's 1 out of 50 is kind of what it's like the lower bound that we're expecting
Sure.
to hit. So, um, yeah, just making sure people are aware. But I'll still get hate messages or emails of people that signed up yesterday and took 30 picks and lost half their money. uh, they're upset. They maybe I didn't properly educate them ahead of time. Maybe they didn't kind of know what the strategies were going into it, or maybe they just got overly excited and threw too much money down or started surge betting or whatever. Um, I think it kind of comes with the territory. You can't make everyone perfect.
Definitely. It's so tricky. Like you can only do so much, I think. And that's something I struggled with too, is like, have people come to me in my DMs or whatever and I don't really give out a ton of picks, and it's not exactly, what I do, but I'll still have people come and ask me, and I know like I want to shake them and be like, just think of it like this. But it almost feels like, sometimes it's hard to get through and hard to get people to also do what's best for them in gambling, because I think it really messes with people's minds. And I think that's why casinos are so successful. But it's tough to think straight within this industry, especially when you're playing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was obvious and it was easy to do, these books would be out of business. So
Yep.
you kind of have to know what you're up against, and yeah, understand that it's going to be difficult. And there's people that are going to be frustrated that they're playing a rigged game that they didn't even know was rigged. Right? I think a lot of
Yeah.
people don't understand that these games are rigged.
Yeah.
Kind of just have to, in a sense, take it as an opportunity to educate these people on the fact that if they don't take this seriously, or if they don't do things the right way, they're going to lose money. And that's how these books are profitable, and that's how these books are in business. So you kind of always have to be
Yeah.
careful. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough taking heat. It's tough going on a losing streak. Like, it's hard to take that on.
Definitely. And I think what I will say for you to talk more about your product is, as far as I know, it's the only, money back guarantee for the money for the product. If you go lose, all your bets, that's, Pickham Expert's not dipping into his pocket to pay you for your losing bets. But for the monthly fee, right, for Pickham Expert, if you don't win, it's a money back guarantee or something along those lines.
Yeah, basically, like over the course of your subscription, like if our AI is not positive over that time
Hmm.
frame, then you're entitled to a full refund. And the reason for that is we built this product. Actually, kind of going back to the origin, like we were like, oh, what
Yeah.
if we just like give this product to our friends, and then they bet a lot, and then we just like ask them for a cut of the profit.
All right, another one, but we're back. Refund policy. Going back to when you were first setting up Pick'em Expert, the ideology behind what you were going to do with it. How did that turn into the refund policy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think our goal with this product was never to kind of just make money to make money. I think we knew we had a winning product. We knew we had a solution that could actually make money from the books, and we wanted a cut of that profit, basically.
Right.
And so originally, we're like, okay, we'll just give this to certain people we know, and then we'll take a percentage of their winnings, and that's how we'll kind of turn it into a business, kind of be like our own like sports betting hedge fund, where
Yep.
we kind of give all these people their picks, and we just kind of trust that they'll pay us a percentage. But at that point, it was like a little tough to manage, and we wanted to be able to scale that a little bit more. And so instead, we decided to launch this to everybody, and our subscription fee is basically like expecting we're taking a cut of the profit that you make. And so that's why we have kind of this guaranteed win rate. If our AI is not positive over the course of your subscription, then you're eligible for a full refund. Because if you're not winning, and our product has not returned positively for you, then you know we don't want to take that money from you. Luckily, we've never had to give out a refund, because we've all
Yep.
been positive over the course of a month. But we just have that in place to help people feel more comfortable, and we will honor that if we run into situations like that ever.
Definitely. And I think going back to that decision that you had between essentially doing what we do, which is like betting syndicate, uh, sell information privately to people, take a cut of people's winnings, do a little more hand holding, and whatnot, and how you've monetized is really interesting. And I think both work. And one thing that I like to tell people is like, as a sharp better, think about your product as information, and like what's the best way for you to sell that. For you can scale really well because you have data science, you have a programming background, machine learning background, whereas I can't scale like you can. But part of my strengths is being able to show people, how to find an edge, and keep looking for the little mistakes the book makes, plus our golf modeling. And it just made more sense to go the other route. But I think that it's people sometimes keep their focus too narrow on, oh, I'm a better, what I do is I win bets. It's like kind of true, but you have a lot of good winning information. It's like, how do you best monetize that? Do you scale through betting partners? Do you scale through a product? It's all on the table, and it's really just what fits you and your lifestyle best.
Yeah, and it's also hard kind of going out into the world and like getting strangers to pay for your bets,
Yeah.
your information, because unfortunately in this industry there's a lot of scammers and there's a lot of people
Oh
that
yeah.
are not authentic and spend more money on their promotional videos than they do on resources to actually help them find good picks. And it kind of it gives the industry a bad name, and it makes it hard for the layman to decipher whether a person actually is giving you good information or not, or whether they're just trying to monetize off you. So I totally understand kind of the betting syndicate avenue, going with people you trust, like knowing you have a good system in place, because then you don't have to deal with one
The
people
DMs.
harassing you for lose if you go on a losing streak, or trying to convince people that are don't want to believe you because they don't really have a reason to. It's tough.
Totally. And this will be my one. I don't give a ton of syndicate tips out, but the best way to scale a syndicate is through referrals, for two reasons. One, you have someone that's worked for you and they've won, right, on your bets. Now, when you go and they tell their friend, it's not you telling them, it's someone else saying, I did this, they win over the long term. And then you can get connected to somebody that you might not know face to face, but there's, social pressure on them not to steal from you because you have that mutual friend who's connected you. So, if Pickham Expert ever goes private and goes behind the scenes, that's how I've found it to work the best, with that, overcoming that problem of like, there's so many scammers in this industry. How do I know this person's legit as opposed to all those other people? I have people in my DMs just asking me if I think people are legit or not all the time, because they're like, I don't know, like they don't know what to think. They're new to the industry, and like I've kind of I'm not really selling anything, so like they just ask me. They're like, "Is this person legit?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't know." Because it's a big problem, Vegas Dave and all these people out here making us look bad. It's no
Yeah,
good.
it's tough. I mean, like I don't blame these people at all, and like unfortunately, there there's easy ways to make a quick buck if you drive around in your Lambo and you hold that wads of cash to your head, and convince people that you made all that money through through prize picks. Luckily, I think word is starting to get out. There's things like Picket that are now in place that
Yes,
you can
right.
use to verify your win rate. Shout out to them. I don't work for them at all. I just think
No.
it's great for the industry, and it really helps kind of validate myself as well. So I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. But yeah, again, like it's one of the toughest things to do is to build trust in this industry, in an industry where inherently is built on a lack of trust. And we have that's probably our core value prop, is we have
Yeah.
our ROI graph is front and center on our website. You can break it down by book, you can break it down by league, you can scroll through every bet we've ever taken historically
Wow.
and see our performances every single day. And some of it's not pretty, to be
Yeah.
completely honest. Some of it's not pretty, and some of it is. And I think users need to be able to see like what the true performance is, and in order to make that decision, and to like come around to converting on a product. And then I think what you were saying before about having friends promote other friends. That's in the tech world, we call that the net promoter score. Like, what's the likelihood
Okay.
that someone that uses your product promotes it to someone else that they know? Because
Yeah.
it's the best way to recruit someone. And that's where we get most of our users is through someone that's won on our platform. They go to their friend
Yeah.
and they say, hey, I actually had success here. I can convince you that I've had success here. I wouldn't lie to you about this. And convince them to sign up for a platform. So it is, it's a world of trying to build as much trust as we can in an industry that has, unfortunately, not too much trust baked into it.
Well said. And well, applause for that, because I do think there's a ton of what's interesting is like you and basically everybody who's come on this podcast, I would say are pretty altruistic. They actually want people to do well. Like Drew is super hardcore like that. Drew, um, very willing to help. But the most visible people in the space, like we can't deny it. Like none of us are the most visible people in the
Right.
space. Those people are, unfortunately kind of the opposite. So I don't know. I think when sports betting kind of reaches an equilibrium and maybe the marketing dollars aren't as heavy flowing in, there might be a higher demand for uh, winning content, people who are teaching you how to do it. We'll see, but yeah, I'm optimistic, and I think it's good to have people like you in the industry, like who actually are winning, and people have an out, right? Like, if they don't know how to win, you're offering a great service, and I think a lot of smart people in the industry back you up on being a winner, plus all your transparency and like plus the refund policy. It's like a safe space for someone to kind of get their start. And I'm sure people come into your product, come into your Discord, they don't know anything. Maybe they're like, oh, we lost 10 in a row. They're one of those people. But after a while, just being in the Discord, talking to you, seeing how correlation works, I bet they could go find bets on their own. And it's a good runway for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we're all kind of on the same team, and we all want to make money in this industry. We all want to beat the Bucks, and it is kind of that catch-22 if you think about it. Like some of these bigger players, uh, they make their money off of referrals from these books, and actually, I personally make my money off of these books.
Yeah.
Through betting and through convincing people to take bets off these platforms. Um, but if every single user was using my platform out there, then these books wouldn't be in business. So it's like this
Right.
catch-22 of like, if I had millions of followers and I was this like massive platform, like would the books be able to survive? And how there's kind of like this equilibrium where you almost like need losing betters to be out there. Unfortunately,
Yep.
as much as you're fight like we're fighting this battle that I don't know if could ever be won. Like there's always going to be people that are
Yeah.
addicted, that are spending money on betting platforms, and we're trying to like be the Robin Hood to just gather a few people and be like, no,
Yeah.
this is how you win. Like this is how you make some money back. But without that influx of losing betters, like you can't have the winning betters. So it is that's one area that I do, from an altruistic perspective, grapple with a little bit. Um, just about this industry as a whole. It's definitely catch-22.
I, I grapple with the same thing. I see it essentially exactly how you see it. I guess what helps me is like I had someone who kind of showed me the ropes in poker, and overall, it's made such a positive impact on my life because I was the right person for it. It wasn't. I didn't go in with a gambling addiction or whatnot, and I enjoyed the game theory and the puzzle, and it worked. But it had such a positive impact. Like that one guy, shout out Ben, changed my life truly. So like, if you can even get a couple people to create some an income stream, a secondary income stream, a full-time income stream, whatever it is, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
You
there's
can,
you try to help as many people as you can, and that's kind of all we can do, to the point where the books allow us to do it. Books
yeah, that's the other thing. Like, please, book. But yeah, that is the case. It's this the betting ecosystem is very complex, and I think it's important. And you talk, our conversations. It's like you do understand, and you talk about things from the book's perspective too. Like they're changing. Will they keep offering that? If will they shut down this correlation, or what are they thinking? We have to keep adapting, whatever it is. What are other bettors doing? And these are all factors that weigh in, that I think when you first start betting, you kind of just think, oh, there's a number, let me make a prediction. But you miss out everything that's kind of like happening behind the scenes. And I think once you take that step into advantage play, and being very thoughtful about the industry like you are, it's important it's almost just comes with the territory to start asking questions like this and start thinking about the books and big picture. So I guess a long-winded question of like, where do you see the books, the DFS platforms going in 2024, and where do you see you trying to adapt? Do you have anything cooking up that's not proprietary and you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of just, well, one thing I'll say is in this industry, you never know what's around the corner. So you
Mhm.
have to be very adaptable. Today we have something that next week we might not.
Mhm.
And we're always going to be adjusting our models. It's a constant game of cat and mouse with these books, and trying to find these winning strategies and continuing to update our models. And um, you know, you have to be smarter than the rest. The books can afford to leave some holes open,
Yep.
as long as they're making enough money off of those specific markets, that you're not taking too big of a dent out of. So I think that there is, I think if these books wanted to try and shut down every correlated bet possible, then they could. But as you're seeing them, they're actually getting, they're not. They're allowing a lot.
Yeah.
If they know that people want to, if they're watching the Super Bowl, they want to bet on players from the same game. And I think as long as there's players, as long as you can bet on players within the same game, there's going to be opportunity for correlation, in most sports. So I think that there's always going to be some modeling opportunities here. The DFS industry as a whole, like where I see it going, there's a lot of regulatory headwinds from what it seems like. I mean, I guess they're
Yeah.
already shutting down New York and Michigan and um, some other states as well. But then I also saw like the leading proponent of shutting down Prize Picks and DraftKings, or sorry, Prize Picks and Underdogs in the DFS books. DraftKings just launched their own fantasy pick'em book, which
Pick
is
six.
so interesting. So now I really like, my head's scrambled at this point. Like I'm thinking that the couple companies that were lobbying against DFS are now joining the DFS. It's hard to say. I mean, if there's money in it, I think it's going to stick around.
Yeah.
And there's probably going to need to be some more regulation that's going to come into play, probably to protect the consumers a bit more. I can imagine VIP programs are going to get a little bit more strict.
Yeah, as they should. As they should.
Betting limits will probably be, you know, looked at a little bit more, uh, just to try to fight off these addictions. I mean, I never thought of myself as having an addictive personality, but I feel addicted to gambling, and luckily I have a positive
Return.
strategy.
Yeah.
But I definitely do feel addicted to the dopamine rush of making a big bet and hitting. And the thing is with my strategies is I've increased my unit sizes. So even
Sure.
if I wanted to go bet recreationally and put $5 down on the game, I don't think I ever could. I
Right.
don't think like at this point I wouldn't get enough dopamine from that win for it to even feel good anymore because of how much I've been betting on my correlated bets. So I can see how gambling addictions can get out of hand. Like you win a bigger bet, you're not going to be able to get the dopamine rush from the smaller bets anymore. You have to kind of keep increasing. So I think that
That's
that's going to be a big thing that regulators are going to have to grapple with.
definitely. That is interesting. I had someone I really look up to say something like, I never figured out if, you know, everybody at the table is addicted to gambling and we're just the ones who figured out how to win, or like we're not addicted to it and that's why we win. I still haven't figured it out. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if I know either.
That's a good point. Like, is it an addiction if you're winning? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to say.
um, the so I forgot to ask you about this, but I know this was a Twitter. I think all the other Twitter questions we basically covered, but I wanted to talk about quickly uh, your thoughts on NBA correlation.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, and I get kind of questions about this all the time. Um, One because a lot of people like to watch the NBA, and there's
Yep.
a lot of markets in it. Um, One thing about the NBA and why it can be difficult to model is there's so many permutations, there's so many markets, there's so many teams, and um, there's so many players available. Uh, which is good in the sense that there's a lot of data, but it's pretty computationally intensive to build some of these models around NBA. The short answer is I do think that there's NBA correlation. Uh, is it the best correlation out there right now? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have NBA correlation in our builder tool, so you can actually find picks that are correlated in NBA, but we don't ship them in our model. So basically, we have a tool that people can use to build their own correlated slips, or they can just tail all of our like AI slips. But we do not include any NBA slips in there because we have a pretty high threshold for the expected ROI for our picks in order to actually ship them in our model. And as of now, they're not the best out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the reason is because correlations, uh, the biggest driver for correlation is possession.
Mm.
And when you have something like basketball, where you're kind of just like flipping back and forth with possession, and there's not as many markets that define possession. Like if you have a quarterback's passing yards, that's very correlated to their possession of the ball, right? If the quarterback's on the field more, it means they keep getting first downs. It means that
Yep.
they're driving down the field further. They're off, like that player just is getting the snap every single time. Like
Yep.
they're getting, there's more opportunities. It's more correlated with possession. In hockey, if you have a power play, like you're on offense the whole time, you know who's going to be on offense, and you're on that side of the ice most of the game. Similar thing with soccer. Like there's a lot of possession in basketball. You know, you can lose and gain possession like in a blink of an eye,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Interesting.
kind of this constant back and forth when you score, and you score so frequently that possession automatically changes.
Clips.
And so it's tough to find really, really strong correlations because of that, because there's so much change in possession. But it's there. I don't want to say that it's
Yeah.
not, and I don't want to knock anyone that's doing NBA correlation because I do think there's some edge. But in terms of like if how I would stack rank it in the other team sports, it's probably on the lower end, if not the lowest, in terms of correlation.
That's interesting. Because it is possession, right? Like that's in football. It's like, okay, you're going to be on the field with your receiver, and then there's an additional like to catch a pass. The passer has to throw it. The defensive players are on the field for that snap. But in basketball, it's like you scored. Okay, the other team now gets the ball. You did well. Okay, the other team gets the ball now. So now you're like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I don't know. I don't know where I would even would even start. What do you think about just simple simple points and assists? I mean, it must be so individual in basketball, or not individual, but on a pair by pair basis, right? Because of the rotations too. Like,
Yeah, it's like if a point guard goes over in their assists, does one of their power forward go over in points?
yeah,
If they're on the same line as one another, or if the opposing team goes under in points, are they missing a lot of shots, and therefore the opposing team center is going to get a lot of rebounds? It's hard to say, and they're like intuitively in most sports you can kind of think of what
yeah,
these correlations might be. Like intuitively you can think a quarterback and wide receiver are going to be correlated with one another. In basketball, it's less obvious, I'd say.
yeah.
Some of these
I agree.
correlations, they don't make as much sense intuitively why they exist. You have to kind of really get into the weeds of it. But then you're also only thinking about this on a pair basis, on a two by two basis. When you get into the correlation of a whole 6-man team or like a whole 6 leg pick, the correlations get a lot more complex.
Yeah,
And the most obvious intuition for other sports, you can usually see it has something to do with possession.
yeah.
With basketball, that's kind of out the window. So you don't really get to see that as much. And so I don't think if you're going to go try to do correlation in NBA, doing it in trying to do it intuitively is not going to be as easy as you may think.
Interesting. And I think it's a good opportunity because I figure, as we know, like the books are allowing some of the stronger correlations, but sometimes they're quick to limit a player. But I like the idea of somebody who's like throws it all together in the NBA. Like maybe they have that insight onto coaching tendencies or injuries, and then they also sprinkle a little correlation, and they also know that you know they also get a little bit of value on the line, and then they put it all together into a slip, and it's like you get when you get everything working, find many ways to win, give yourself a lot of outs, and you could probably put it together and do well in NBA because if you have a fresh underdog account, you can bet 2 grand a slip on NBA. So you know any NBA crushers, all of the Haralabob out there, and whoever's listening to this adamantly who crushes NBA, there's opportunity I think to do a little less obvious stuff with NBA that will maybe not have as high an ROI, but it gives you that opportunity to make a higher actual dollar amount, right?
Yeah, I think like how I would say if you were going to use something like a correlation tool is like have some insights into your picks going into it. Like maybe find some line discrepancies you like, understand some injury reports, and then if you have a lot of picks within the same game, plug that into like our correlation builder tool and see whether you've got an obvious negative correlation there or if there's any positive correlation or if you're
Yeah.
flat. Because what you want to avoid too is some people can find some good lines. Like this happens all the time. If you're like looking at Monday Night Football, a lot of people will make a slip entirely for that game and they'll find really good individual lines. But what they don't realize is when they put all those lines together, they actually have an inverse correlation.
Hmm.
Maybe they found a really good receiver under and a quarterback over. Um,
Right.
that's an obvious one, but maybe there's some less obvious ones that they don't
Hmm.
realize when they put their slip together. So I think that's kind of where correlation can probably help with NBA, is if you've kind of sprinkled in uh, all your different components like line discrepancies, injury reports, and then see if there's like maybe some positive correlation there, then that's kind of like the bow on top of your pick, I guess, is how I would think about it.
Dude, that's a great point. And like if you're playing these games that are they're forced parlay games. Like it's hit, why not have a tool that allows you to just gut check your correlation, if only to prevent yourself from making massive mistakes where you're going against, correlate against each other. And because that could be deadly. Like I tell people in golf, like people will be like, you know, take a golfer under, another golfer over, and I'm like, that you'll never like, you won't win. That doesn't win, no matter what. It's just the correlation is so negative that no matter how good the lines are. So it's like having that gut check in sports that you're not familiar with. Like if I were to go look at NBA, I would love to use your tool just to check my ideas out, to know what kind of works, and maybe even put a slip in that I didn't have time to check and I think is good. Go back, test it in the builder later, test a similar thing to see the correlation. Like it's it's a great study tool also, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think making sure that you're not making any like obviously bad decisions. Like you're not taking Patrick Mahomes over in his passing yards and Travis Kelsey under, because some people have completely independent. They treat all the events as independent, and they look at the individual probabilities. Or correlation is basically looking at dependent probabilities, like the interdependent probabilities of one another. And if you're using an independent strategy, you should still kind of consider the dependencies. It's you should never just completely write that off. And I think that's where at least just gut checking correlation can be like just a nice safe check.
I agree. I agree. And I'll make sure to include like all of your social, we can find you on Twitter, on TikTok, I know. And then of course on your, flagship product, I'll link that in the show notes. And get it in the Discord. I'm also in my Discord. I'm setting up the partner program where we have a little button, hopefully a click in our Discord, take you to PickEm Expert, sign you up, because I really, yeah, I've been following you for a while, and I love always reading your tweets about correlation. I learn a lot from you, and it changes how I think about my betting and any type of parlay I'm currently doing or evaluating like future opportunities. I think what you're doing is really cool. You've carved out an awesome niche that I think that you're top of the heap for it. And yeah, man, I appreciate you doing this twice, because it's I know you're very busy. I know that. So thanks for coming on and doing this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I think likewise. It's good to be kind of in this Twitter betting community. There's a lot of smart people. I've learned a lot just kind of getting looped into all this. And yeah, and again, if there's anyone out there listening to this, they have questions, like, please reach out, DM me on Twitter, DM me on Discord, whatever it is. I'm always happy to lend a helping hand.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. Thanks everybody for listening to this interview. I learned a ton. I hope everybody did as well. I'm sure this isn't the last we'll hear from Pickham Expert. So because I now at this point we record 2 episodes a week, so I'll have to record with them next week, or else I'll miss them too much. So yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you on a later episode for sure. Take care, and thanks everybody for listening.